This podcast was made possible by our members on armchairhistory.tv. Use code ARMCHAIRCHATS for 60% off of your first month. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Armchair Chats podcast. Today I'm excited to introduce a special guest from the YouTube gaming community. He's a veteran of the Total War games and an esteemed content creator known as PixelatedApollo. With a following of over 900,000 subscribers, he expertly brings historical and fantasy battles to life with engaging commentary. Our paths crossed in 2022 during the promotion of our video game, Fire and Maneuver, but I've been a fan of his channel before I even started mine. It's great to have you here, Apollo. How are things going?
Man, what an intro. I think that's the best intro I've ever gotten. I'm good, man. I'm glad to be here.
All right, very good. Yeah, I think I just want to dive straight in. I have a question or topic just regarding the recent Total War drama. Obviously, you built your channel on Total War. I was checking back your oldest published video, which I think was 7 years ago, on like a Napoleon Total War battle or something like that. I don't know if you deleted any videos though. Have you done that?
I think when I first started YouTube, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I deleted a good 15 videos, thinking I was deleting a playlist or something. But yeah, it's something like that. It's crazy how fast time goes. I think my first ever video is a Medieval 2 video.
Yeah, that's right. It wasn't Napoleon came out fairly recently. Actually, it was Medieval Online Battle.
Yeah, that's what I. And if you watch that first video, I'm like, "Hey guys, welcome back," and it's it's the first, because I deleted the videos, but it's it doesn't make sense. It's welcome back,
Yeah. But for those who don't know, Total War's been in a little bit of. I guess they've been on a few drama channels. You've spoken a little bit about them. I saw you posted kind of like an April Fool's style video about a Medieval 3 dig at them, and I think a few Total War YouTubers have kind of been jumping on the train there. Yeah,
it's really kind of sad what has become of Total War. So a lot of people called that video an April Fool's type video, because essentially what I did in that video was pretend that Medieval 3 was coming out and that they were going to fix all their issues and everything. It was more of a jab at CA, being like, this is what you guys should be doing. But instead you're not. So yeah, it was just, I love the game so much that I just get so upset about, where it's gone. I dedicated my entire channel basically to that game. And yeah, to see it kind of fall apart, which could be good, it could be a good thing. This could set them straight, scare them straight.
For those who don't know, what are people mainly upset, or even yourself, what are people upset over recently?
Well, yeah, it's fun. It's strange because there's people upset about different things. Because with Warhammer, it attracted a lot of because originally the game was a historical focus, and this brought in a huge audience that were not accustomed to the classics like Rome Total War, Medieval 2 Total War, and whatnot. So they're upset about totally different things, where the historical crowd is upset about other things. But all I know from my perspective is that I think that they've tried to streamline the game a little bit to where it's gotten very arcadey. They've gotten lazy with the battles and the actual physics-based mechanics, where it's just I don't. They've been using the same crappy engine over and over and over, and they have the resources to fix it or make a new one. Even if it took a long time, I think people would be more than happy to wait. And they've gotten lazy with titles. Of course, Total War Pharaoh came out, and more people, when that game came out, more people were playing Rome 2, which is a 10-year-old game, than Pharaoh. And that was one of the saddest. I felt it felt nice, but at the same time, I was like, this is sad.
Yeah, and I think that game was interesting too, because it was not one of their Saga titles, which you'd expect a Saga title to get less players, and that's normal. But they marketed this as a full-blown historical release with the price that reflected that as well. But just as many people were playing as like kind of the Saga games. I think even games like Empire Total War still perform better than some of their recent games, with exception of the Warhammer series. That I think that honestly saved them after flopping so many times with the historical games. But right now they still have not now they're done with Warhammer, and I don't know what they're doing next. And then the whole Hyenas thing. You introduced me to the Hyenas game last time we spoke, I believe, and I saw, maybe it was a month ago, that the whole thing got canceled, and it was a big ordeal. That apparently that game had been more expensive than like any other project they were working on. They had all their teams on it, and it was like supposed to be a big thing for them, but that got completely canceled alongside the failure of Pharaoh. So that's a huge blow.
Yeah, it's I mean, I've heard up to 40%, and these are all just rumors, but up to 40% of the employees are potentially getting canned, which is I mean, that's really bad. The problem was the CA, they lost their identity. I think either they got new people that came in that didn't give a damn about the games, and they just like, oh, these new guys are gonna help us make more money, So what happened is like they just started chasing trends, instead of just being who they were, which is making a game that is extremely unique and nothing is like it. They have a monopoly of this style of game. Instead, they chased trends. I mean, you had Total War Arena, which was kind of like a free-to-play online, kind of like World of Tanks, but with battles. And it was actually not half bad. It was that was the surprise. I actually enjoyed it, which is ironic because it's the game that they just shut down. And then they did a lot of mobile games. They did like a Medieval Kingdoms, which was terrible.
I remember that.
Yeah. Then they made a card game like Magic, but instead with like historical figures, which it could have been cool, but I don't know what the hell's going on with that game.
Usually you see companies do those kind of like chasing trends and experimenting when their main line game or their product is doing super well and they've got room to experiment. But it's odd to me seeing them kind of flounder like that when they're, I guess, like Warhammer held down the fort for those 3 games that they did. But in terms of historical games and their main, like I said with Pharaoh, that was presented as a full-blown game. That wasn't a saga or a spin-off. That was their full title, and that didn't do well. So for them to be so experimental at a time where their main games aren't bringing in the level of revenue that they should be is certainly odd to me. And I think you mentioned as well bringing in new people. Something I would want to clarify is those new people are likely not the regular developers. I'm sure the regular developers working on these games are good people and they're working very hard to put those games together. But the new people that you're probably referring to is when these companies get this large, they bring in these big marketing executives and investors and those types of people who then start dictating what the games have to be. And so what you'll find is like AA games and companies, as they go to the AAA level, get like hijacked by the executives. And obviously this is all speculation, but you can kind of see with the original Total War games, you can tell the developers are doing the art direction and choosing the title and the mechanics and the design. And you kind of had to be a generalist in the early 2000s in that kind of gaming space. But nowadays, you kind of have these corporate people who are detached from the development process, who ultimately are making the major decisions on what games to pursue. I think that's been a huge problem for them.
Oh yeah, and that's 100%. That's what I meant with new people coming in. I have no issue with the developer, the actual like programmers and the creative people there. I'm sure they have a lot of they're tied down to a lot of limitations because they're probably in these meetings talking to these the marketers or whatever, and they're thinking, well, is this going to save us money? Like how's
Yeah.
And it sucks, and this is not a Creative Assembly unique issue. This is across the board affecting gaming companies, where it's just gaming has become too cool. It's become too big,
right?
Which it's great to see it grow and everything, but when money gets involved and it's a big market, it waters it down, and instead of like, to me, I'm pretty passionate about games because for me, I think it should be a respected art. just like writing poetry or sculpting or whatever. This is a beautiful piece of art that is developed by many people, where it's an interactive piece of art. Like you get to be involved and there's so many layers of art design, HUD design, story, whatever. And these things, I mean, it's just sad to see that, when money is the main focus, and I understand like companies got to make money, this is how it works. No money, no games. But for that to just be the focus for all these franchises that I loved, it's sad, man. It sucks.
Yeah. I think the worst part of it too is oftentimes what I think is their pursuit of trying to maximize profit is actually hurting them in the long run, and they could be making more money by going. But I mean, choosing Pharaoh because that'll save them cost, but it doesn't bring in more revenue. How does that make sense when if they had committed themselves to a Medieval 3 or whatever the fans had been asking for, or something just on the scale and the scope of those old sandbox games where you had all of Europe or multiple continents to span and build an empire, those games did well. They had they have good performance, and they're still played today. Mm-hmm. It seems weird that the company's kind of been taken over and pursuing profit so much, or I guess just trying to reduce costs so much that the games aren't, at this point, the profits are falling off. So usually you expect when they're taken over, they maximize profit and the companies end up doing super well, but they lose the dedicated fan base. It almost seems as if now they're in actual trouble because they attempted that, but they're not actually profitable, and they lost a lot of their fan base. And now they're, from the outside, it seems like they're kind of in trouble now. And I don't know, what do you think their next moves should be or will be? I don't know where they're going to go from here.
Well, yeah, and they lost the Warhammer fan base. That was what... that was
like the last one.
Yeah,
that's the last one. Yeah,
that was what's keeping them afloat, because Warhammer was a financial success. I personally don't like the games, but I can see how people could enjoy them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Especially if you come from a non-Total War background. So it's interesting. So yeah, they pissed them off, and now they have nothing. And so in terms of like what they could do, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, a part of me wants me to see them go bankrupt. I mean, I know that's petty of me, but I don't want people to lose their jobs. I mean, that's obviously, but like, I'm so mad. I don't really think about it much anymore, but just like, I think back of when I was playing Medieval 2, and I was just like, oh my God, I can't wait to see like the future of this franchise. Yeah. Like, they're gonna make, so like, look how great Medieval 2 is. Wait until Medieval 3, and there's gonna be like all these gritty animations and kills and like unique units and ways to siege battles or siege settlements, and to see it just so bland and soulless and just money hungry, it is heartbreaking. And it's almost like, it's like The Godfather. It's like, look what they done to my boy, like, just put him down, So I think they, if they have to fire a bunch of people, that sucks. Honestly, you got to see some heads roll, like, metaphorically. Obviously, you gotta fire somebody's got to be blamed, and it's not the developers, it's the people who are calling the shots. And apparently somebody got fired. I don't know.
There's rumors about that. I've seen a few channels. There's some rumors about some executives either moving jobs or losing jobs, or either just speaking from the outside, because obviously we don't have any confirmed information, but it definitely seems chaotic what's looking in. Whether just based on the performance of their recent game and the cancellation of their biggest game, and now supposed layoffs and a restructuring. But I think as well, something that I share your frustration. I grew up on these games too, and before I even wanted to get into history and do my history channel, I wanted to be a game developer, and I love game design and playing all the different historical strategy games. So I share the same frustration. I think our frustration is more out of the love of what the games were and what they could be. I think that's also important, but what they are now is just so disappointing of what the potential is. You also mentioned a monopoly. And I think I want to clarify as well. I think it's not as though a monopoly in this case means no one can enter the space, otherwise they're going to get bought out or they're going to get shut down. There are definitely like indie devs that can get in the space, but it's so difficult with entering into the space in the first place, because to create a full sandbox with lots of different units and all these different interactions, the bar is set high enough that it can be intimidating, I think, for indie developers to try to enter that space. And so far, not many really have.
No, and that's like that classic saying, you don't like Google? Make your own Google. It's like, okay, yeah. It's like, yeah, let me just use, infrastructure built by the government to help me out, So it's like that, because Total War is and that's why it's so unique, is that it's very demanding and very complex, and the engine is complicated, and that's why there's not many companies that do it. And there's some companies that get close, they make similar games with large scale battles like Ultimate General and various other. You got like Mountain Blade, which is a little different, but kind of the similar thing.
I think it's Knights of Honor 2 made a game that tried to be similar. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Yeah, I played that. I didn't play it much. so yeah, it's not, that's what I mean by monopoly, is like they don't have a competitor that's keeping them on their toes, that are like, hey, they can't afford to skip out or do shortcuts because there's another company that's like, oh, they're making their own Total War and it looks epic. It's kind of like Call of Duty and Battlefield. They have that balance, and it's good to have that, because it pushes companies and it makes them so they're not lazy, which is what happened to Total War. They got lazy and they started developing cash grabs and unfinished games and piecing out factions as DLC, and which again, they're not unique in that regard. Like a lot of companies are doing this, where you have to buy a game piecemeal to enjoy it fully, but you got to make a good game, and CA's kind of dropped the ball there. So yeah, I just hope. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I just hope that there's this other issue of like constant growth. And this is like kind of like a capitalistic kind of like mindset, where it's like it's like, how are you doing December of last year? You better be up 40%. So you have this exponential growth, which is very damaging in my opinion, because if I was running a gaming company and say this year we made 5 million, I'm good with that. Like, I don't need to make, 8 million next year. I'm like, this is good. I have my team. I don't need to expand. I don't need to make more games. We're good. Like, we're happy. Yeah. I don't understand why that can't be a thing. And I feel like that's the other issue with Total War, is that every year they're like, oh, we got a new office here, and they're working on this and this, and it's like, I think they just expanded too quickly, and they're just trying to constantly grow that.
I noticed that too. I think there's definitely, if they had not opened all these, I think they had ones in Bulgaria or something, or Sofia or something like that. Mm-hmm. If they had just not spent the money on that and spent the money instead on just developing just regular historical games that fit within the lines of what people have been asking for, even if they had made less money, I think something that maybe wasn't accounted for as well, or maybe it's just negligent, but the costs to run the company would be lower, and therefore you don't need that amount of, but like you said, they want to see on the paper the number going up, and it doesn't matter if they had opened another studio. They want the revenue coming in to keep doubling, and that's definitely a huge problem.
Yeah. I mean, that's because the investors, they got to see it growing, and that's, I mean, even with my brother, he does like a tech thing, and the company's doing fine, but they fired a bunch of people to reach that 40% growth.
Yeah.
And it's just disgusting. It's like, oh, okay, so you just kicked people out of their job, which they live off of, to reach some stupid, quote, just to make investors happy. And so I think there's a big part of that as well. I think CA just wanted to be a big dog, up there with like Ubisoft or whatever, and And
I think as well a lot of the decisions made by executives tend to be short term because they want to maximize profit on the paper of what is here and now. So like you had mentioned the engine. Remaking their engine or improving it or starting from scratch, whatever they wanted to do, is not going to result in short-term financial gain. So you're just going to keep putting that off and pushing that.
Yeah.
From what I've heard, they did do that. They would kind of start to do it and they kept pushing it off and pulling people away to work on other things. And that was, I think what happens too, from what I've heard, and it's all kind of alleged, nothing is really confirmed, but that their engine is so old that as they keep pushing the standards higher and higher with their games and adding more to them, it becomes so unstable that the people who are supposed to be working on the new engine need to be pulled to fix the problems with the old engine, but they're not truly fixable. It's all band-aids. So you just need to keep pulling those people off. But if they just focused on not having rapid expansion so much and reworked on that engine and kind of went back to their roots and what made them successful. Again, I'm not a corporate, I don't know the full picture, but it definitely seems from the outside that it just seems chaotic. Nothing really seems like it's being run efficiently. And I think that speaks in the numbers of, if you look on the player charts for their recent titles, you can clearly see they're not doing great. So whether, we're wrong in a few of these things and we're kind of speculating, the fact remains that they're in some kind of trouble. And I'm just kind of curious where they go from here. But
yeah, I mean, I hope, honestly, again, I hate to see people fired, but, I feel like if this is like a humbling experience for them, they get someone new, someone that loves the game, or, I mean, that's a lot to ask for, but you get people who actually care for the game. And I just want them to say, hey guys, let's go back to our roots. Let's build a good historical game. Something where
imagine if they use that in the marketing. I would imagine all the comments and the audience eating that up if they use that as one of their taglines.
Yeah.
And if it was genuine, if they really meant that. And it's one of those areas where it crosses over between people liking it and it doing well financially in terms of players. I genuinely do believe they would get a lot of players back and on board with that. It's not necessary. There's sometimes where if you appease the hardcore fans, you end up making a game that only appeals to 1% of your player base. But I genuinely believe this is one of those areas where it crosses over between the hardcore fans and actual profitability, that if they went back to their roots genuinely, it would actually end up being successful for them. I think the standards are so low at this point. That's all people want from them.
Yeah. And you could even do a cool, if it's like Medieval 3, you could have the trailer is some young, coming to age lord that has a claim to his mother's territory, and he has a Casibellum or whatever, and he's got to return to his roots, or something some metaphoric, this is us returning to greatness, and
instead we got a dung beetle pushing some crap.
A turd, yeah.
That was the last trailer. For those who don't know, is a dung beetle pushing some crap forward.
Yeah.
That was a very odd trailer. When I saw that, I immediately just started laughing, just sharing that with everyone. But
yeah.
Anyways, I don't mean to make the podcast a let's hate on Total War.
Hey,
but I definitely
it's therapeutic, man.
Yep. Before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to thank our supporters on ArmchairHistory.tv. AHTV is our own streaming service that hosts hundreds of history videos with new exclusive content released every single week. By signing up today, you can listen to all of our podcast episodes ad-free and on the go using our mobile app. Additionally, if you upgrade to the Sarge or Officer tier, you gain access to the complete version of every podcast. Use discount code ArmchairChats for 60% off of your first month.
Yeah.
Speaking of one of the competitors, Ultimate General American Revolution recently released an alpha build or something like that on their... It's a private launcher. I'm sure you've seen Jackie Fish post a lot about that.
Oh, yeah.
You haven't really spoken on it too much. What's your opinion on that?
I personally just haven't gotten to it. I know I should. I know that's a smart YouTube thing to do. It's a new game and everything. It looks good. It looks good. I enjoy. What's really special about those Ultimate General games is that the battles feel, in terms of positioning and the length of the battles, they feel more realistic than Total War. Now, of course, Total War has better models and animations, and I mean, really, Ultimate General is 2D basically. But it looks good. It's like, it's not ugly. It's so I think I don't think it's gonna take people are calling it like the Total War killer. That is like I get so big ol' eye roll whenever I see a YouTuber.
Same thing for Manor Lords, calling that the Total War killer, but that's not what
it's not. Okay, it's not. All right. It's definitely good. It's definitely, great to see historical games come out that look fantastic. But it's not Total War. But it's still, it's its own thing and it's good. I think that game looks promising. I haven't really played it yet, but I definitely need to. I've just been so busy with stuff. I'm definitely gonna play that soon.
Yeah, I tried it out, and I think so. It's just like, it honestly is an alpha, so I can't even really judge it. They did an early access off of Steam to kind of. The only criticism I do have is they charge $50 to get access to that, and that's a bit of an ask for a game where you start it up, half the menus are grayed out, and the campaign's very, very limited right now. And the battles also, I was watching Jackie Fish, he was streaming it, and his enemies, they were all clumping up in one big ball. There was like 10 name tags on top of each other. They weren't forming a line, they were all kind of glitched out. So the AI definitely needs work, which I don't normally mind if it's early access, but to charge $50 for it was a bit much to do that. But I mean, they want to get some feedback off of Steam, refine the game for a year, and then put it on Steam, and I think that's smart to do. But from what I've gauged so far, I don't think the battles seem like the range is very short, and units kind of just charge each other very quickly. And I like when, even like the Total War mods I'll download, I like when the range is very far away. It gives the enemy AI time to kind of reposition and form its lines. I'm sure you've experienced in Total War games sometimes that if the range is short enough, as the enemy's coming into range, they kind of stack troops onto each other, and to try to form their lines, they accidentally walk into your line and start a melee. So that, I think it just benefits them to kind of space things out. You also can't zoom out very much too, so everything's kind of very zoomed in, a little too cartoony. The campaign level of that game is extremely innovative, which I wouldn't be surprised if Paradox and Total War look at what they're doing for the campaign. I was very, very surprised. I did not know in their campaign units will fight each other as if it's a battle on the campaign level. So you have each regiment kind of moving as a separate stack. If those regiments engage each other on the campaign, they will actually start firing at each other. And then you can click a button to enter into the battle or just watch it unfold on the campaign map. But it actually works like a battle. So if you click a regiment on the campaign map, double right click on an enemy, you can see them charging them. So it's actually running like a mini battle on the camp. That's an incredibly impressive auto-resolve feature that's more than just a button click, but you actually see the troops engaging and you decide when you want to jump in. That's very cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the biggest thing about that game in terms of new and innovation is definitely the campaign. It seems like battles are just kind of the same. But yeah, that campaign does look really it kind of reminds me of a game that it was made by a lot of former Medieval 2 developers. I think it was called Oriental Empires. But it was similar in that you play on a campaign map, but then when you have units go, like armies go in, you can zoom in like real time and play the battle. I don't think it was a huge success though. But yeah, hopefully. I mean, if I was Paradox, I would be like, hey guys, let's build an engine for battles. Yeah,
I know. They could just put the nail in the coffin at this point. And Paradox is doing incredible. That's a company where they've got their profits and they've got their dedicated community mostly appeased, and they've got everything pretty much lined up. There's some exceptions. I think some recent games have not done as well at first, but they definitely are on the right track. I think Paradox is going to be like...
Yeah, I think they're doing better than Creative Assembly, that's for sure. They have some that's the meme of that company is the DLC. Like, you buy the game for like $30, but you got to spend $1,000 for all the DLC. But yeah, they had some titles that released that were kind of lackluster. I think for a while now, the last like 3 or so have been not too well received.
Yeah, City Skylines 2, Victoria 3, and one other
Roman
game.
One.
Yep.
Yeah. They said seemed kind of shallow. Crusader Kings 3. I'm not an expert at these games, so I can't really give a a deep analysis of it, but I've heard that people say it's just too easy. It's not as challenging as Crusader Kings 2. But yeah, I think generally speaking, I think they're doing a pretty good job. And if I was them, I'd say, hey, Total War, they're dropping the ball. Guys, let's create an engine. Let's have real-time battles. We can do this. Like soak up that void. Dude, Paradox would be king of strategy.
Yeah. Well, they're already doing, I saw they're publishing, not developing, but they're publishing a game that's kind of like a Civ 5 type of game. So they're already experimenting with more strategy games outside of that typical grand strategy space. So it wouldn't surprise me if in the next decade something gets announced that is related, but we'll see. I don't know if they have a reason to, because they're profiting very well, and those games ultimately those games are just a map. So it's mainly coding work that you have to do. You don't need all the artwork and modeling and animations. They don't need to rent out a studio and do the motion capture and do anything like that. So I don't know if they would even need to, but they definitely could, and that would hurt Total War.
Oh yeah, I mean that would be the Total War killer. That will be worthy of Total War killer right there. Yeah, I mean, it would be great even if it was just kind of rudimental. Like even if it was just like kind of worked. Yeah, it would put pressure on Total War to kind of like, all right, we got to flesh out our battles and make some better games. But yeah, and then you mentioned Manor Lords, which is a indie game that looks. It's like a city building game mixed with battles that looks really good.
The customization looks really good. I like that you can design these kind of troops, and I'm pretty sure each soldier, each model is representative of an actual population from your village. It's not abstracted in any way, to my understanding. So you actually need to kind of employ soldiers or levy them from your village. That looked really cool. Yeah,
and those are again like. These are great ideas for Total War, like customizing units and, giving them special like banners and, maybe they won a special battle and you can put that on there. Just little things.
I was very surprised that they didn't do that for Warhammer. I mean, most of the Warhammer community is all about painting and customizing models. So I was surprised they didn't have anything like that. The game that we're working on next, we were doing just polling and asking people features that they were most excited for in kind of the pitch I had given them. And the biggest thing they voted for was customization. So we were originally going to say like, oh, we have these kind of regiments that you can customize. Maybe you can like swap out a uniform or something like that. But that's that was the thing they were most excited for. So we kind of rethought a lot of the systems. And between like dyeing different uniforms, editing your regimental flags for each and every regiment, assigning their officer, those kind of things people were very excited about. So we ended up putting a lot more emphasis in that side of development. But I'm surprised more companies haven't done that. It doesn't seem especially difficult. It's not like it's a new layer of AI or something that's more abstract. It's just basic customization features. Yeah. There's definitely an issue in terms of like batching the units and performance. If you can colorize and change each and every model, I could definitely see there being like performance issues. So you definitely have to build the game from the start with that in mind. And for Total War, for them, I'm sure their engine is so old that's just not something that's that feasible, but I'm not entirely sure. It seems like a good idea though. I'm surprised more companies don't do that. Manor Lords is definitely going into that.
Yeah, I mean, dude, everybody loves Total War for different reasons. For me, I love the roleplay and just the LARP and like feeling like you're a general and having like some unique like old guard type unit and you gotta like sacrifice them, somewhere, and just the heartbreak of seeing them like hold off a horde of enemies and to the last, and you see their like custom banner on the ground laying there, like that's the stuff that would drive it would. I would love that.
I think that's something that Medieval 2 had a little bit more of that because you couldn't recruit certain regiments from certain cities, or even replenish them. So if you sent an army out that was very elite on a long campaign, you would have to send them all the way back to kind of refit them, or at least back to a citadel. And that gave you a little bit more attachment to these elite knights. But I definitely know what you mean. The one thing I feel is missing, from a lot of the Total War games, I feel like it would be nice to follow these troops on campaign and get attached to certain regiments that perform very well, and have your own naturally emerging Old Guard. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a unit in the game recruitable called Old Guard. Make it so I can develop my own Old Guard through their actions in battle, that they become the old veterans who can hold the line much better than other regiments. I would love to see something like that. And not, again, to talk more about our game, but that was another thing I wanted to focus on too, is we're going into the RPG kind of space and trying to have that meet more of like a Mount and Blade meets Total War. That's where I'm trying to go. I think Ultimate General, the American Revolution, did a great job in. It's really cool to see their campaign level is like Paradox meets Total War, and that's really cool to see. But bringing some of the Mount and Blade kind of RPG elements that you see in games like Battle Brothers, that's like an indie game, or even some of the just the regular Mount and Blade games. I would love to see that more with the Total War formula. I think that would actually be a good match.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's something that's missing in those types of games, is the customization and like, I mean, even, you know, you mentioned Medieval 2 with the elite units. Even if you have like, because you can merge units in Medieval 2, so if you have like a unit with a ton of chevrons merging with a green unit, like a fresh unit, it lowers their overall chevrons.
Right.
So you could even have that where like you have elite units, and then they you know, take casualties and you got to replenish them. But if you replenish them with a bunch of new guys, their overall quality goes down.
Yeah.
And then you can even have it where you have other units where men become veterans, and you can promote them into the elite unit to preserve that veterancy and experience. So it's just, yeah, those little things that like that goes far. That makes it so people play your game for over 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, not to go back to CA, but like they just make games that last what, like 6 months? It feels like
it's just the short term thinking. What can make us even just a little bit of money at no cost, and we just pump it out and keep churning stuff out.
Yeah, but can you blame them?
Yeah,
because it works. You know, these
it worked
keep
past
buying.
tense. I feel like it's no long. I think people are now realizing. I used to buy every Total War game when they came out. Every one. I didn't even question it. Even up to Warhammer, even every single one I'd buy, no matter what.
Yeah.
I don't remember the last time I bought one, which that used to be my favorite game. So it's just. I think more and more people, and the player numbers speak to that as well. So I think more and more people are kind of being put off. The fact too, like, I think something that people don't talk about enough is Napoleon Total War. A lot of people say it's a better game, and I believe the battles are more refined. The UI is more refined. The sound effects are better. You can make a whole list, but more people play Empire. I think by double the player count, more people are playing Empire. The reason people are is because Empire is a sandbox game. Even some criticism for Ultimate General, though I think they are building up to this, but a criticism I have of Ultimate General is when you play that game, using Civil War as an example, you play a playthrough as the Union, you play a playthrough as the Confederacy. Why would you ever play the game again? And I noticed on your channel, you played it when it came out, you made a bunch of videos on it, and then you never covered it again. And but games like Empire and Napoleon, you still cover those, or even Rome 2. I think one of the most important things about a strategy game in general, it doesn't matter what strategy game it is in any kind of space, whether it's military focused or otherwise, is the sandbox element of it. Empire, you have multiple continents you can go to. I did a live stream and said, you guys decide where I go and what I play as. You can make the decisions. And people said, play as Sweden and go conquer Ohio and do it with only cavalry. So I'm like doing this challenge, trying to go across continent. But that's a full sandbox experience. If you play Napoleon Total War, what are you, anti-Napoleon or pro-Napoleon? Once you've done those playthroughs, what else? There is no take this force and go conquer that and make your own story. The story is given to you. It's Napoleon's story. The game is the time period is named after a person who he's already made the story. You're just recreating it. So these kind of games that go for recreating the story instead of you making your own, I think that's a huge thing that I'm sure they're aware of it, but it just feels like they're not. That a game like Pharaoh, what is the sandbox potential in playing in the span of Egypt and Palestine and a little bit of Anatolia? What can you do after you've become the pharaoh once? What do you do after that? But in a game like Empire, the story is not given to you at all. It's just loosely, the game is called Empire. It's not attached. It's not British Empire. It's not Britannia, like Thrones of Britannia. It's just Empire. You can do whatever you want. So that kind of sandbox element is certainly missing. And the other two factors that are huge are the modability and multiplayer. The multiplayer allows you go on and do siege tournaments with Rome 2. You play most of your Total War experiences that you post are modded. And then otherwise, with games like Bannerlord that you still play, it's sandbox that you get to create a story over and over again. But those are 3 very important factors. I would argue the most important factors when it comes to any strategy game. And all 3 of those are actively being neglected. In Pharaoh, people say the multiplayer doesn't really work. There's no matchmaking. There's not enough players. The moddability, as we both know, has gone down. In Medieval 2, you can overhaul the whole game. Nowadays, it's barely moddable. And in terms of sandbox, what do you do besides become the Pharaoh? So all 3 of those things are being neglected, and all 3 of those things are required to make a good Total War game. And they're not necessarily difficult, but they're just being ignored. And I think it's the short-term focus. They don't care if the game's played over several years or modded. They just want to get it out and churn them out.
They spend more on the marketing to like fool people into putting their, using their hard-earned cash to buy it. And that's the other thing. Another thing about Empire is that it's closely similar to the modern world, so people can kind of play as, if they're German, they can play as Austria or Prussia or whatever, and so I think there's some fun nationalistic kind of stuff going that people can enjoy about that era. But Pharaoh, it's such long history, and I'm not against making a game about ancient history, but it's hard to have as much as a emotional connection to some of these events as you would later period.
I mean, people can't even say, "Oh, I'm playing as my ancestors" or whatever, because it's just such a small region. If you at least Rome 2, that was one of their main flagship games. They've got all of Europe, all of the Middle East. You can play anywhere you want to. So if they didn't like Rome, you could still enjoy it if you liked Middle Eastern history, or if you like Germanic or whatever it is.
North African,
And that's what makes these games. It's the sandbox, and sandboxes require. Think about how many games. Even Paradox, who did March of the Eagles, that's just Europe. You're just playing one story as Napoleon or against him, and that's it. Why would you ever replay that game again? But games like Hearts of Iron. The main things driving games like most people play that game not to reenact World War II for the 100th time. Most people are going down alternate history trees. I mean, the last DLC they released is all centered around Sweden. Sweden didn't fight in World War II. At Sweden, I think in Finland and a couple others. But the whole point of that Paradox realizes is multiplayer, mods, and sandbox. Those are the 3 things, and they do all of them. In fact, I know a developer who worked with Paradox at one point, and they were publishing their game, and they said you need to include Steam Workshop. It's non-negotiable, even if it doesn't fit the theme of your game, because that's what keeps these sandbox games. It keeps them alive. You need the mod support. Multiplayer is optional. It depends on the type of game. It's, in some cases, that can hurt games, I find, but it's definitely a bonus for replayability. And then the sandbox is the most important element. And Paradox knows that for sure. Like you were even saying about the nationalistic thing. You can play in Peru. You can play as the United States. You can play as Austria. Play wherever you want. And each of them has their own alternate history
play in China,
paths.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. I mean, they could have done that with Napoleon Total War, where it's crazy scenarios, the British Empire turns on everyone, or whatever. Napoleon, joins the coalition, you could have done crazy stuff. And even in terms of the multiplayer side, I mean, I thought with Shogun 2 was honestly, they're probably the last great Total War. They push the limits of multiplayer with Avatar Conquest, and they had all these fun game modes where I thought, oh man, there's so much you can do with Total War multiplayer. You could come up with different game modes. You could do a reinforcement mode where extra troops show up later, or you could do a King of the Hill mode where you earn points and you can spend it on units that will show up later, and you fight over these strategic points. You could have really interesting siege maps. You can bring back Avatar Conquest and customize troops. You can even do a online campaign, but instead of being a full-blown campaign, it's just it's a game board that just gets you to the battles,
right? Or something it's a big Or you go ahead and explain it.
Well, I was just saying, like, for example, I know this is not a strategy game, but Rising Storm Vietnam, they have an online campaign where they play for territories. You can kind of set up some sort of almost game boardy-esque kind of simple campaign that just sets up the battles to give the battles more meaning and like, oh, I'm fighting, I got to win this so I, gain this territory, just something. There's so much, but they just, every year they do the bare bones. And I remember
instead of guessing what they're going to add next, it's what are they going to cut next in their next
basically, or bring back and act like they're like innovative geniuses.
Right.
I mean, Warhammer 2, they brought back free for all, and it's the most like what Rome Total War Free For All was so freaking interesting because you have these massive maps and you could do 2v2v2v2, you could do 2v2v1v1 like there was just crazy. And like some of my favorite videos with Prince of Macedon playing free for alls in Rome Total War because he was just so creative of like keeping his army together and earning because they do scored resolution, so you basically be scored based on like quality of kills and whatnot. And he would get so creative about like how he would like take on multiple like enemy after enemy after, and it was so interesting. So when they brought back free for all for Warhammer 2, it was the most like bland and boring, and they acted like this is like the coolest thing ever. Like, look guys, we brought it back. I'm like, this sucks.
Yeah. I didn't even know they let you do that in Rome, but a lot of old games let you do. I mean, old games are also easier. Well, I don't want to say easier to develop because we have tools, we have so many engines and stuff you can choose from. Making a game now is a lot easier, but back then I think the requirements of like to finish you need like higher fidelity models and animations. Back then you could get away with a bit more, but older games I feel like just had more fun. They didn't take themselves they took themselves seriously in the main parts of the game. So starting a campaign, it's not as like cartoony and arcadey, but then they have these little bonus features or Easter eggs that are just fun to just jump on, and the games don't really do that much anymore, I find.
I mean, could you argue that these new tools that make gaming or game development a little bit easier hurts in ways? Because maybe like older games have to like get creative on doing certain features or whatever, and
also I think you can trick more people with. There's plenty of games that are asset flipped, and if people don't know what that means, that's where you go and buy models on the Unity store or whatever storefront you're using. You can slap together all the models and make a fake level, or even just some people release games on Steam where the entire level is an asset that they bought for $100, and it looks like it's good because it's all using high quality models, but you can tell something's a bit off. Maybe the animations aren't interacting, or everything's a bit stiff, or the player controller's not right, or it doesn't fit. So yeah, it's definitely a pro and con because the bar is certainly a lot lower to get started, and so people can jump in and just scam you with stuff that looks ostensibly good. Back then, if you didn't know how to write your own stuff and program your own games from scratch, you couldn't really enter in that space. So yeah, I think there's definitely pros and cons to that. But
yeah, I think it can be more shallow. It's not in terms of mechanics. So that's I don't even know.
And that's a great idea, the whole campaign map that you said. I remember thinking about that after playing Rising Storm or the Red Orchestra Stalingrad game. They did that there as well, where you conquer tiles. I definitely feel like people would want to. Dude, one thing I want to bring up as well, and I've seen you playing Chivalry 2. Chivalry 2, I don't really like first-person shooters or games like that, but I still come back to that game because their team objectives mode is awesome. That's great to feel like you're a big team pushing in this narrative from objective to objective. That kind of stuff, that's so innovative in multiplayer that's like the only reason I'll play that game. Most games, they'd say team deathmatch, rack up kills, and that's it. And I hate playing that. That's
in Chivalry 2 would be a great game to add that multiplayer campaign because you have the three different factions and you can fight over territories, and like the field battle would determine who attacks and who defends. Chivalry 2 can do a lot with that, but I think Total War could have done that too. Where it's like, okay, I get it, it's hard to have 6 people in a traditional Total War campaign game, because there's just, you gotta wait your turn, it's really slow. But if you do it where it's just like
a lobby,
Yeah, like a board game or something where it's just the bear. It's just basically ways to get armies to other armies in fighting over territory.
Yeah.
And they don't. They just do the bare bones. So yeah.
Something maybe on a lighter note. Thanks for listening. To hear the full version of this chat, become a Sarge or Officer tier member over on armchairhistory.tv. Use code ArmchairChats for 60% off of your first month. It's great having you on the podcast. Before we sign off, though, do you have any projects or social media handles that you want to promote? If people liked our talk today, where can they go follow you, and what are you doing next?
Yeah, I mean, really the biggest thing is just my YouTube channel, PixelatedApollo. I'm trying to reach 1 million. I'm so close. So you can definitely find some of the videos there. I try to be as genuine as possible and do what I love. So, if you're looking for that kind of thing, definitely check it out. But yeah, that's about it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Apollo.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, certainly. Big thanks to everyone who tuned in. Until next time, take care.